Welcome to today's episode of the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. We have a special guest with us, Josh Sanabria, the CEO and founder of Go Architect, a Chicago-based design technology firm. Josh completed his master's in architecture from Andrews University in Michigan in 2014 and has since worked in various fields, including corporate architecture, marketing, and even a drone company. In 2018, he founded Go Architect, initially as an architecture book publishing company, but quickly pivoted to focus on educational master planning. Since then, Go Architect has helped organizations with over $14.5 billion in facility, investment, and design innovation opportunities. Josh has also authored several books and developed software projects to enhance design, community outreach, and financial aspects of master planning. Today, we'll dive into his journey, the innovative ACE plans for K through 12 school districts, and his latest project, Engage, which aims to revolutionize community engagement. Prepare to learn a lot. Prepare to get inappropriate. Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. I'm Paul Angelle, your host. Today, I'm really excited. I've got Joshua Sanabria with us today. And Josh, just to keep me from having to do it, could you tell our listeners and our viewers where you are and how you got there and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I live here in downtown Chicago on the 39th floor of a, of a skyscraper. Uh, Actually, one of my dreams to always, live in a city and live high up and have a great view and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Chicago is a great place. I am also the CEO of Go Architect. So we're a urban planning, technology, design firm here in the city. But we do work California, Texas, different places. And yeah, I don't know. Is there something else that you'd like to know?
Let's talk about your background and beginnings. Could you share your journey in the architecture and design space and what led you to start Go Architect?
Well, so I graduated from architecture school about 10 years ago, and I, did the 5.5, 6 year package to get a master's in architecture. And then I moved out to California. I worked for some corporate architecture firms, learned some things, made some contacts, was very fortunate to really develop some relationships and things like that. And so it was just the right timing in 2018 to try something new, to kind of go out on my own. And I was very fortunate that my previous bosses, some of them came on as clients. So that was nice. That was very, very, very helpful to start a business. And then it was also a good time personally because I had been supporting my wife and I and our family financially while she was in grad school. And so we kind of swapped places. So she was able to start working and I was able to take the risk to start a business. And as you know, and probably many listeners know, it takes a while to get off the ground. Even with existing clients, it took a while to figure out exactly what we were offering and what was working and what wasn't. I would say probably about 2 years, really, 2.5 years to figure that out. And then, really, just sometime in 2021, especially in 2022, we figured out the formula and we've been growing ever since.
What were some of the initial challenges you faced when transitioning from an architecture book publishing company to focusing on educational master planning?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so the book publishing is an example of one of the things that did not quite work. So I had worked in firms that did a lot of educational type of projects. Personally, I like books. I like writing and photography and editorial design, all of that kind of stuff. And so there was this year long or so period where I wrote a kid's book even and worked with other authors and things like that and experimented with the idea of being a full-time publisher in the field of education, architecture, things like that. And one of the things you learn pretty quickly is that books take a long time to put together. And then even once you have something that is pretty decent, you have to sell tens of thousands of copies to make a profit. When you go to Barnes and Noble or any other bookstore or even Amazon, they are selling the book for about twice as much as the publisher is earning to produce the book. So if the book is $20, that means the publisher is selling it to them, to Barnes and Noble, for about 10. And then of course that $10 has to include things like printing, marketing, overhead, fulfillment, all that kind of stuff. So on a $20 book, you are maybe making 3, 4, if you're lucky, dollars per unit. If you're lucky, right? It's usually much less. It's usually in the $2 or $1 range. And you can imagine trying to build a business like that, really what it is, it's kind of like a movie studio in a way. You're going to have 10 duds and maybe one hits, but you have to kind of make it to that 10th or 11th book or a movie to hit that success. And that was just a formula that I could not afford to take that gamble. And even if you do, there's no guarantees. So it was something that we had to move past. And during that time period, we also produced online classes with other, let's say, authors or contributors, all of that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, in the background, right, humming along was the facility master planning, which is kind of a niche area, but basically when large organizations like, let's say, a school district, they need to plan ahead for the next 10 or 20 years of what buildings they need to replace, repair, or build from scratch. And this can be based off of, in their case, where are the students coming from, where they estimated to live, if there's a new suburban development or something being made in a specific neighborhood, how many students are estimated to enter that neighborhood, and then what do we need to serve those students. And so they work on a much grander scale in terms of timeline, and facility master planning helps them accomplish this plan and know what they need to do over the next 10 years. So we had been working on these projects since I was an employee at the other firms, and I kept going with these projects and writing software and improving random things and working with partners and clients to make them better. So that was kind of humming along the bottom through this whole time. And then you know, after a year or two of doing the publishing and kind of deciding that that was not going to be the right fit, kind of had this moment where I was like, well, this is the only thing that's really legitimately working, earning money, kind of providing the lifeline to all of the books and online classes. Maybe we should just focus on this 100%, jump all the way in and see what happens. And that was a real turning point for everything.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Can you explain what Agile Capital and equity plans are and how they are different from traditional facilities master plans?
Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, we have done like 22 facility master plans. So from small organizations all the way up to, multi-billion dollar school districts. So in that time period, we've developed software, we've developed process, we've developed all these kinds of things that take our service and our products, and we can offer that to a client. So the question is, how do you even start to protect that process and that software? Well, you might just say, oh, patent it. Well, patents don't really work like that. Patents are meant to protect a specific mechanism or aspect of a mechanism that you have engineered to do a certain job. It's not really meant to protect a process or a brand or things like that. Even some of the most famous things on the planet are not patented. For example, the formula for Coca-Cola is not patented. It's a trade secret within the company, right? So after analyzing this kind of question of how do we improve our product and take it to the next level, we decided to trademark our process and the service that we offer. So Agile Capital and Equity Plan is essentially us saying that we have all of the components in-house and we work to innovate them further, and we are offering that service to our clients rather than just a off-the-shelf generic master plan that they could theoretically go to some other firm and get. Yeah.
Community engagement. How does Go Architect incorporate community outreach into the master planning process, and why, in your opinion, is this important?
Well, community outreach is basically essential. So it's either essential contractually with the client or it's essential legally if you are pursuing, let's say, bond fundraising from voters. So on a large project, let's say, like here in Chicago, we have some sports teams that are trying to get public money to build some new stadiums, right, for the Bears or the White Sox, things like that. In order to even be eligible to go after public funding, you are required to do community engagement. And that can take many forms. It can be public meetings, it can be surveys, it can be a series of public forums, presentations. It doesn't really always come down to one approach, but the point is that you have to prove that you've done it because a lot of times people will be voting on the bond measure or whatever it is. So, with that in mind, right, you can go completely old school where you just show up with some printouts and some boards and people just give you their feedback while looking at the boards, or you could go completely digital where you just send out a survey and you don't really ever see anyone and people just fill out the survey. So in reality, some blend of the two is the best approach because you don't want to be all in person, but you don't want to be all digital. And so after doing a lot of this type of work, we created Engage, for example, which is a special survey tool to help us improve a lot of the little annoying things sometimes, but definitely opportunities in that community engagement process where software can help out with a lot of stuff. That's no secret, but it's really like how can we focus the software to fix the specific needs while keeping in mind that it's not going to solve every single thing.
You've undertaken several software projects. Can
Yeah.
you discuss how these projects have improved the design and the financial aspects of master planning?
Oh yeah. Yes, I mean that's maybe in one of the ways that we stand out is that we are so involved with these particular type of projects that we see just micro opportunities everywhere. And so I don't even know how many random things that we've written to solve micro issues, but we're always creating some little, whether it's a data analysis component or some client facing dashboard that makes things easier, or with Engage, which is a complete standalone SaaS application that anyone in the world can use. So every kind of scale. Um, and it's a little bit of fun. We get to create some new stuff and practice things. With Engage, for example, it's free for anyone to use. So you could go to engagebygo.com, engagebygo.com, and you can sign up and you can use it for your own projects. So I think it's, you know, I know I kind of reset it before. I know I kind of already said it before, but software is not going to fix everything, but it can definitely smooth out the bumps, make people feel heard, make people more efficient. Anytime you're dealing with these public projects where there's a lot of money involved, I mean, buildings are really expensive. You really can't build much of anything for less than like $10 million. So you are talking about a lot of money, and people want to know what's happening. They want to feel that they have a voice, but then you also have to balance that out with, well, what are the logical priorities that we have? Or, whether that's money, or maybe certain parts of the city are better to develop in for many different reasons. It's all kind of, it's complicated, but at the same time, when you have the tools to help you figure it out, it becomes a lot smoother.
As a leader, what strategies have you found most effective in assembling and growing what I would assume is a multifaceted team?
Yeah, definitely multifaceted. I think part of it is, as a leader, at least in a small firm like ours, I am able to add value in every corner. So I think that's probably pretty common for an entrepreneur, in the beginning or with a small company. You generally kind of know every job, or at least the core tenets of every job. So I think that's been helpful to, always be curious, always be learning new things, but to also focus a little bit on what I know and I can learn, and is like, if I'm at steps 1 through 3, I don't jump to 12. I jump to like 5 and then I learn 4, or I jump to 7 and I learn 5 and 6. So it's like you kind of have to always be pushing yourself, but you should also focus on what is achievable within a relatively short time frame, because it's so easy to get distracted and, burned out, or you can't afford to finish a project, all that kind of stuff. um, that's very stereotypical in buildings. People create these really big master visions with towers and, parks and a levitating train, and then like none of it happens. Yeah, like all kinds of stuff, right? Like the Hyperloop, Elon Musk's Hyperloop program, right? We released it, everyone was super excited, and now here we are, some 11 years later. There's not a single functioning Hyperloop system in the entire world, right? Because it was too far. It didn't actually accomplish what really needed to be solved, which was, how do we make tunnels cheaper? That's the actual issue with most of that type of transportation. It wasn't speed. We don't necessarily need to go that much faster. We need to make it less expensive. That's what we actually need to do. So I think it's like, have an understanding of every component that you touch, be willing to learn more, but definitely be willing to like learn alongside your team members. And then the other thing is, communicate with everyone very regularly. So whether that's, weekly meetings, obviously things like Slack channel, that's a minimum nowadays, especially because everyone can be remote in different places, things like that. So communication and being curious and learning, I think, are basically the three most important, to me at least.
How
Yeah.
has living and working in downtown Chicago influenced your work? And
Hmm.
by that matter, your outlook on the future of the city?
Yeah. Chicago is a very interesting place. Um, I'll start with some of the. I'll start with the negatives, and lean into the positives at the end. So the negatives are that Chicago, I think, has, perhaps a little unfairly, but perhaps also fairly, has a slight image problem. When you tell somebody that you're moving to Chicago or you live in Chicago, you get one of two answers. So you either get the answer, oh, it's freezing, or oh, it's crime ridden and like overrun with crime. So these are kind of the two just stereotype answers you get. Now, weather, okay, yes, it does get cold, but it does also get cold in New York, right? And you don't necessarily think of New York as being freezing. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. And then the crime aspect is a much more delicate conversation, but I think people also underestimate how crime has actually improved in the entire United States over the last 30 years. I mean, we actually have a very low crime rate overall, and even in Chicago. And that becomes even more true when you consider that Chicago is a huge place. When you look at neighborhoods downtown, we look at neighborhoods around the river, north, around, we're on Lake Michigan, obviously. 99% of places are perfectly safe, right? So I think it's a matter of you have these very specific neighborhoods or very specific moments in time that, of course, reach the public awareness or the public opinion, and I'll say taint the water a little bit. Now, on the flips, right, right. So there's a little bit of that. Now, the flip side, though, is that Chicago is one of these places where, it's an older city in the US, which has its downsides like infrastructure and just things like that. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, all those places. I will say the benefit is that the city was laid out in a way that is world class. So it's laid out. There's a famous thing called the Daniel Burnham Plan, which outlined like the parks and kind of all of the components that are downtown and the grid, things like that along the river. And that has yielded just dividends upon dividends over the decades. And so you have neighborhoods that are, at this point, 100 years old, where you get that tree cover, that tree canopy over the streets, and you get those old brownstone type of buildings. And then even since then, because you had this plan from the beginning, which defined what is private and public, you have things like Grant Park, which I live next to, which is, I mean, second to basically Central Park, which is its larger and more famous cousin, is an incredible urban park. And then it connects to the Lakeshore Park, which out of, I think it's about 24 miles of lakefront from the city of Chicago, something like 19 miles of it is public park, right? That is an outstanding percentage of public access to the lake, which is so big, it's essentially an ocean. You compare that to places like Los Angeles, which in the 1950s turned the Los Angeles River into literally a concrete basin, and whose, frontage on the ocean is something like 50% or more privately owned, and so it's not accessible. I mean, Chicago has done an amazing job over the decades, right? Over many, many public leaders, private institutions, overall, to make it an actual livable and walkable place. So I think to actually live here is pretty great. You have access to city, world class city. All the sports teams are a little terrible, but whatever. Maybe they'll, we'll have another Michael Jordan moment eventually. But to actually live here is pretty fantastic. And from a professional standpoint, I mean, at least in the architecture field, most major firms in the United States were either started here or have an office here. So one of those benefits, for example, is that the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, that chapter in the city, I think is like 5,000 people. it's ginormous. The amount of architects walking around and urban planners walking around is amazing. And so there's always something to go to. There's always a conference. You're always going to be able to collaborate or just have lunch with somebody. So it's a great place to be a professional, at least in my field. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the future of Go Architect and the design technology industry as a whole? I'm asking that because I'm curious how
Mm.
you see your company evolving in the coming years.
I think it's going to depend on, I'll start over. It's going to be focused on the urban planning, urban design, master planning, and software. That I pretty much know. The question is, how are we going to take what we've built over the last 6 years and keep going? Because in theory, we could probably stay with our current product right now for, you know, 5, 10 years maybe, and be fine. But we both know that AI and other generating tools, and obviously shifts in economics, and in general, right, the U.S. is slowing down in population growth unless we increase, um, you know, people from other countries, unless we increase immigration. We have that same, reality in many other Western countries. So it's like, what form is education going to take over the next 10, 20 years, 30 years within my working life? So I think it's the kind of thing where I don't know the exact answer to that, but I'm hoping and I'm planning so that the formula of always being involved with my clients and their needs and the community, and I mean, we literally listen to the community and gather their feedback so we can hear those trends. We have the data from municipalities about where people are moving or leaving. I'm hoping that formula of listening, innovating continues to work, and that's really going to be the future. And then the precise product or blend of products is kind of up to that iteration process. So I can't necessarily say we will still be doing facility master planning or agile capital and equity plans in 10 years, but I think it will be some evolution of that. Um, and we'll just, I don't know, I guess that's kind of the exciting thing, because it feels like the future is still an adventure rather than it just being all laid out. Maybe it makes some people nervous, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Let's say somebody watching or listening would like to pick your brain, get in touch with you, hire you, re- work with you. What is the best way for someone like to do that?
So they can go to goarchitect.com. We have all of our work and portfolio and publications and things like that we've been on, so they can definitely learn about what we do. I'd also invite them to check out Engage. It is available for free on engagebygo.com. So it can be used by more than just urban planners and architects. It's useful for marketing and lead generation and things like that. So I invite them to check that out too.
Awesome. Well, I've actually learned a lot today. This is a great, great conversation. I thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for
And
having me. Yeah.
to our listeners and our viewers, thank you for watching. And remember, if you're going to grow, chances are good that you're going to have to do something inappropriate.